Attention. You are partial.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. You're seeing a first presentation from me because I don't do this, so that's why I'm recording. So maybe I have something to work on later. My name is Michael Teeter. I'm a multifaceted tech kind of person that does a fair amount of Ruby and Rails, and for starting back in the 1.5 Rails era, almost before internet, but not quite. And so I've sort of bounced in and out of Rails and Ruby for years, and Ruby is, I would say, my easiest favorite language. So I have other favorite languages, but it's my easiest favorite language. Today we're going to talk about REPL-based development, which if you've worked in some other languages, you're probably familiar with, or you know it as something else in the Ruby world, and with a little bonus of interactive debugging. So what is this? It's how to build software iteratively from a REPL and a graphical debugger. Instead of the traditional write your code in a source file, compile it, run it, build it, whatever, test it, go back, make changes, put some print debugs, try again, try again, try again. What is a REPL? A REPL is a read, eval, print loop. It's basically what you do every day in IRB. You put some command in, it evaluates that, it prints the result, and then you're back at a prompt again. It's just the cool name for it. It's also known as an interactive shell, which we're already familiar with, and you may use IRB or Rails console for testing syntax if you're like me and you don't remember anything from yesterday, and you have to try things again. Oh yes, this is the syntax for this language today. Maybe you're doing math. Sometimes it's the easiest way to do a quick calculation, or you're testing regular expressions because you forget all of the little details on doing regular expressions. Now, why do this kind of development? This is good for exploratory development when you don't really know maybe what you're doing yet, or you don't know the data that you're dealing with. And it makes it a fast, iterative way of basically testing a theory in your code, maintaining your state while you're testing the theory, learning something, modifying the code, refreshing that without losing your state, and essentially building up your knowledge as you go along. And with the interactive debugger and the data inspector, you get the benefit of being able to drill into complex data structures that otherwise can be a bit challenging just from a command line or from print debugging. So now we just go straight to the live demo. I didn't time this, so I don't know how long it's going to take. Maybe it's 20 minutes, maybe it's 5 minutes. We'll see. And if it's 5 minutes, then we have more time for pizza and beer.
Yeah, I mean, the talk before the pizza is no problem.
Yeah. Nobody is worried if that one ends early. Okay.
Yes.
I don't know how to make the debug section bigger. I can't find out how to increase the font size.
To the right, so it's like half a screen at the right.
Really, if I drag this to the right, will it increase the font size?
There's a little icon to the probably.
Well, now it's separate, but
There's the button.
See the little button to the right of the X symbol?
yeah, this one.
Yeah, this.
There you go.
Layout settings.
Okay. So
You just kind of make the text bigger.
I just want to make the text bigger.
I just reduced the resolution of my screen.
Yeah.
System preferences. This
Yeah. Well, I think this is probably it's not ideal, but it's visible. Yes. Okay. So now how do I put this back? Move to. I want it back.
There you go.
Have you tried the shift control plus?
I just want it back. Yeah, I did try that. I didn't try the shift. I did the command.
You tried dragging it and dropping it to the edge of the.
Yeah, it wants to. I'm trying. I'm in the new beta UI layout.
Right.
RubyMine. So there's some changes and there's some simplification. Well, this is what we have now. We'll just keep it here for now. So, no, I really would like it back where it belongs. There we go. So here's the idea. You normally, and you do this a lot in Rails console, if you've ever run Rails console in debug mode, that's where I started doing this, is you're working on something, so you start the console in debug mode, and you have everything that I just promised automatically, including source reloading. It's not automatic with a file watcher, but it's good enough. And you can maintain your state throughout the process. But sometimes you're working on something outside of Rails, and you would like to be able to do the same thing, so we're going to do it just from straight Ruby. So we've got our starter app here, which is just a file with a hello world. And if we run this current file, then obviously it's going, well, I've got the debugger on. Then it's going to stop, and here you are, and there's nothing interesting to do. So what we need is we need the ability to be able to reload the source file while we're still in debug mode. And I cheat a little bit, and I've got my code pre-made, so I don't have to fail. Now you do have to restart it when you add this function because the function didn't exist yet, so there is no reload. So here, if we go to the console, you can do a reload now, and it will annoy you with this message the first time. And then it'll show you, these are the things that we reloaded. These are the files that we reloaded. So we can test, we can run hello, and then you see hello world. Okay, that's what we expect. And now let's say, let's make a change in the file, reload, and then run it again. And the change is there. And you've still got your state, which right now is not interesting because we didn't put anything in local state. But we'll see later that that is more interesting. So what I want to use for an example here is something that I was working on. I was doing some web scraping. And web scraping is, there's probably 100 different ways to scrape the same web page. And so sometimes you really want to test a lot of different ideas to pick the approach that is least fragile, hopefully. And so let's put a file here, a module called scraper. And right now, it does nothing. And we will go and include this. Reload. So now you see scraper shows up as an option here in this context. So it now is aware that it exists because it has required it, because we reloaded the file. So now let's do something interesting with the scraper. And let's take a basic page and fetch that.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
So this is RubyMine. If you're using just IRB, how would it differ?
Honestly, I don't know. I've never run. There is a way to run the debugger from IRDB or from command line. I have no idea what the process is.
Okay.
It certainly should be possible. I know this is also possible in VS Code once you set up Ruby debugging in VS Code. And I've done it there. I'm just more familiar with RubyMine, so I'm doing the demo here. But and especially for the data inspector, then you need the IDE for that. And I would not be surprised if it's possible to do this in Vim or Emacs too, if you find all the right pieces and do all the right config. So now we have a scraper function called fetch HTTP, and let's go back here. Obviously, if we try to call this right now, it won't exist because we just added it. So it shows it, but that's because of the editor. But we can't run it because it doesn't actually exist yet. So let's reload. And now let's run this. And, I left this out on purpose because this is what happens when you're doing exploratory stuff. You do something, it's like, oh, I made a stupid mistake and I forgot something. And you don't want to have to start all the way over. So then you go make your change and say, yes, let me have the stuff that I need here. And let's put that in. Let's reload. And now let's run our fetch. And it takes a moment. And now we've got a whole bunch of data. Now, if we can debug, we can put a breakpoint in here, or I can use the IDE, or I can use the console and set a local variable. Let's just set a watch here on scraper fetch HTTP. And now it's going to run it. And slowly, eventually, now you see the result, which, if you wish, you can drill into. But now we've made a little progress, and unlike starting in just the console, we don't have to write the code in the console and then test it and then copy paste it into our source code. We're writing directly in the source code and just testing it live almost. So let's make this a bit more interesting, and let's let's test some things. So I was new to Nokogiri, and Nokogiri provides lots of different tools for web scraping and probably a lot of other things that I didn't encounter. And one of the common things you'll do is we need to set a variable here. Let's call it doc. Is you'll use XPath queries to fetch something from within your HTML document. So now you see doc has appeared here as a local variable, and we can say let's get our H2s. And now we see these are H2s. That's not so interesting because Nokogiri has got a fairly complex object, so let's break this down a bit and say we want the text of those. And now we see, oh sorry, this is Dutch stuff because I'm doing a Dutch government data project for my own thing, and it doesn't even mean anything to me because I'm lazy and I haven't learned Dutch yet, but that's what it is. And maybe then you just filter it out and you're like, yeah, whatever. So here you see we're easily able to drill down, and when you're trying to figure out how to do something like web scraping, it's a nice way to get somewhere more quickly than well, I don't even know how else I would do it. It would just be slower. But let's say what I get right now, I'm looking at this. This is not what I expected. So let's go to the web and let's pull up the page and do what we always do. And what I want right now is this date. And I want to figure out how to get that. So I go into the inspector, and we go to this thing here, and we find out that I'm not a front ender, but it seems like they've stuck some semantically different things in this context of an H1. So it's a bit more complex than it needs to be, and I just want this part out of it. So let's go back and let's change. Let's write a function to do this. And what we know what we want to do is we want to get the H1 because that was an H1. And let's just see how many H1s are there, you know? And it
Should be only one.
as it turns out, there is only one. Yeah, it should be.
Should be.
In theory, but you know,
Yes.
I have a suspicion that their docs are generated by something else.
Yes.
So you're kind of at the mercy of whatever their generator does. And their generator changed recently, which is why you really should find something other than scraping as your way to build your business. Because I'm already firefighting and I haven't released it yet. But so here we see the output of this as text is what I want is in there. So now it's just a regex problem, and I'll spare you the how we get to that point, and I'll show you the result. So we're going to do an XPath to get the H1. We're going to get the first element because we believe that it's the first H1 that has what we want. Then we're going to set up a regex that matches that style, and then do a match and get the first capture result. So that's just what you do. But the process of getting to this sometimes can involve a lot of playing around here to kind of feel your way through the data. And it's so much easier to do this when you can actually do things like this and see, see the results. Even let's go back. Let's say we want this, and we look into it here in the inspector, and we see, oh, this is unfortunately this is an unlabeled. This is a list with no ID, nothing to go by. So we know it's relative to the H1, it's a sibling, so maybe we can do something with that, and then maybe we can go inside and drill into that. And to get to that point involves more trial and error, really. Let's go down here. Here are some examples of what you might do to find your way through this. Is that visible? Yeah. So we get our H1. And these are all things that I would do actually either down here in the graphical part of the debugger, or I would just do it here at the command line and save it as a variable, and then it goes into I build up my. Let's just show this. This here. There's my H. So there's my H1. So now I've got something in local state, and I can play with it up here. So I can do. Well, let's just copy it. That's faster. And let's get the text. Okay. So there we see we've made some progress. It's all in here in one text block. But I can do some various string work or regex to get what I want out of this. Let's also get rid of this because it keeps reloading, and that's slow. Let's see what else we have. Okay, so that was a basic web scraping example using this. And this entire time, anything that I change here, I can just do a reload here, and whatever knowledge that I've collected in the process is now part of the available tools for my next step forward. For example, we've got doc already, so let's call extract doc, and there's the date, easy. And then the other side of this is if you're working with an API and you're getting back huge chunks of JSON data, it's nice to be able to do the same thing. I'll spare you the slow approach, and I'll just show you kind of how we do. So now we've got an API, and we'll bring this in.
Mike, I think we have to.
Oh, we time? Yeah. Okay. Good. So that was good enough. You see how this works and the process. The one piece of magic here is this one function called reload, which I built from reading 2 or 3 blog posts people have made on this topic, and there's very little to it. Basically, it's just calling load essentially on whatever files you want to be reloaded in the current state, and that's it. And now you can do in the dark development much faster than at least the way that I was doing it before. Any questions?
Question?
Yes?
So are you using it in your day-to-day? Like you have a big project, you break out into this, experiment, come back to the big project, or how do you do it?
No, like for example, I did this most with a company a few years ago, and I had to do some work on a big legacy Rails project.
Yeah.
So, of course, how it is, there's not documentation. If there is, it's out of date.
Yeah.
And so I used the Rails console in debug mode to really just start to test out stuff, especially with database. You've got a huge database, and I would say, okay, give me this record and put it here. And then I would start trying to make associations and testing that way. And on the rare occasion, in those cases, you're not even necessarily changing and reloading, but sometimes you do. You're trying to build a new feature. I'll actually use this for building features.
Right.
It just allows me to, I guess it's been some time since I've actually written 10 or 20 lines of code and they worked right the first time. Mm-hmm. So, you put what you learn in here, and then you try it and you see the result, and yet you don't lose all of the state that you built up in your discovery. So, yeah, and then with this web scraping, I used it nonstop just to find my way through the data. Yes.
Is this really the Rails console, or is it?
No, this is just a Ruby console. It's just
Custom built.
it's just the debugger basically. And you can also get something like this. You can call irb.console or something. If you require IRB, you can call and get a console from your program. But then I think maybe if you did something with the debugger, you could do something there. But I don't need to do any of that here because I can just from here or in VS Code, you can just debug the current file. So it runs the current file in the context of the debugger as long as you've set a breakpoint. Otherwise it runs it and it finishes it, and you're like, where?
And I've done a poor man's version of this in just a text file by just putting a binding.pry at the
Yeah, exactly.
file.
Exactly. Yeah, that's one way to do it, and it's it's like the old GBD or whatever. Debugging is hardcore. It works, but this for me is easier.
It's Ruby Mice from JetBrains, right?
Yes.
Okay.
But like I
So-
say, you can do everything that I just showed. You can do from VS Code because I tested that also.
Oh.
Yeah. It's just the layout is different, and I'm not so familiar, so I wouldn't be able to demonstrate it well.
Right. I think Ruby Mice is not free for sure.
No, it's not. It's not. But honestly, I pay for the tools because I get a lot of value out of it.
Any question?
Otherwise, you can ask during pizza.
Yep.
Yeah. So let's go to pizza then.
Okay.
Thank you so much, mate.
Thank you. Okay.
So you were saying you don't normally do presentations?
No.
You were
Okay. Great.